Thank you all for joining us for this next session on creating meaningful connections. In this last session, we will be diving a little bit deeper into creating meaningful connections in the future. How will meaningful connections look like in the future? What will we need in order to pull it off? If you're not familiar with the format, it will be mainly also your input that will play a big role. We are here together with Tamsin from Qubify. She will be also a main speaker, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing from Tamsin. What do you think meaningful connections in the future would look like?
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Who has been here? We've been here for 2 days, and this is the 4th of our series about meaningful connections. Who's been here for the previous ones? Okay, some and not others. So just to tell you what the other 3 sessions are about, the first one looked at what the definition of a meaningful connection was. And what people felt there was when you meet someone, it's whether you intend to go on and do something with them later. Have you got some intention to take it further? We also looked at whether you can do meaningful connections in online meetings. Is that possible? Since you were not here, and we did say it was interactive, then I'm going to immediately ask you, Kat, what do you reckon to the idea of can you make a meaningful connection with someone online?
I'm sure you probably can. It maybe would just be a bit harder because you don't really get the same feel from someone in person that you get. So you'd probably need to put a lot more effort into it.
Great, completely agree. And any other thoughts on that? Anita?
I would say I definitely agree with what Kat said. It's probably a lot harder online to make a connection, but yeah.
And the preparation, because I think you're saying about some more effort. You know you're coming. What effort, if you go into an online meeting, what do you do in preparation for it to try and make it as meaningful as possible?
I'd probably say make notes, be very interactive as soon as I get into the meeting. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Perfect. So I think that's really nice answers, and it ties in with what we had earlier, which is that yes, everyone generally believes nowadays virtual meetings are not going away. We're all used to them. We're not necessarily perfect at them, and we recognize that they need a bit more preparation. So my friend John at the back there, who you will easily recognize in his orange shirt, he did the session before on those online connections and talked very much about how the preparation beforehand, making sure that you yourself feel calm and you're comfortable going into those online meetings, that you've got your background right, that when you're talking to someone in the online meeting, you're actually looking at them in the eye. It isn't that your camera's down here and you're looking down there and talking to them. So there are lots of things we can do to make those online meetings better, but they're definitely one of the things where we're going to see those in the future, I think. They're not going away. So this is a brainstorming session. And so we're going to go around as well and say, what do you think meetings are, meaningful connections in meetings will look like in 5 years' time? What would you like to see change and get better within the next 5 years? If I think about the discussions we had earlier, we were looking at 3 things. Before the meeting, is there anything that we can do before we come together that will help that meeting go better when we come together? And I think one of the things that was discussed back in our first talk was whether the apps that give you access to people's profiles before you go to a meeting, whether they're useful. So is there anything before we go to the meeting that could make it better? Is there anything during the meeting that could make it better? I just gave you some of John's tips for virtual meetings. And Adam was talking earlier as well about how in face-to-face meetings, one of the important things is to actually put a people-first focus on your face-to-face meeting. You might be there in a sales role, but actually let's really try and understand the person that you're talking to, not just go in with a sales pitch. And then I think there's a third thing, which is after the meeting, what can we do to actually make sure we take that meeting further and develop the relationship further? And is there any way that technology can help us with that? Some of you may have seen Adam is developing a very nice app which helps you to remember the meeting you had with someone by collecting their photo and other information. He can demonstrate it to anyone that's interested, so that then when you go back to contact them afterwards, it might even have an action list that you've made, and it will prompt you and remind you to go back to the person. So those are 3 areas where you could possibly make things better. What can we do to prepare for the meetings? What can we do to make the meetings more meaningful when we're talking? And what can we do afterwards? Now, I do have some ideas myself for where we could make some of these things better, but the point of this as a campfire is to hear your ideas. So I'm going to randomly select people and ask you, where have you had a meeting that's worked very well, and what would you like to see in 5 years' time that will make meetings, and we're talking about a one-to-one with a person, what would you see in 5 years' time that will make meetings better on that one-to-one? Anyone want to offer before I randomly pick someone? Okay, I knew Adam would offer.
You knew it was coming. So I think that when you're on screen with someone, it's an exchange. You know, some people are more expressive, more vocal, more visual, whatever. But actually, the thing we take away is a memory. And unfortunately, digital is not as good as in person. We remember people in person. We exercise all of our senses. So we've got sensory deprivation in a way when we're online. So one thing I'd like to see happen, John and your team maybe, some innovative approaches here for you, is I should be able to find something from not just an image, but around the image, like a website. I should be able to pull that information in and literally take a snapshot of the person as a picture and some of the information I need about that person. So can I have the person, their email address and their LinkedIn, and it create a card that I just pull, a bit like I would if I was setting up a meeting on the calendar of Google, where it says, well, there's 72 people you met in the last 3 months. What have you done about it? So I'd have an accountability track that I met a person, they look like this, and here was their details, but not a CRM, not something I have to build manually. So that's what I'd like to see, is a way of pulling in data, points, LinkedIn, profile, whatever, and put it next to a snapshot of the person. And even ask the person, do you mind if I take a screenshot of you so I can remember you? Now that's slightly different from what my app does. My app's an in-person thing, but in an online scenario, I'd like that to happen in front of me. So it's quick, and I can identify the person. I can pick a date and say, well, I met this person on the 20th. Surely I must have had some action point or next step or something to come of it. And I think a lot of the online meetings we have fade into the background. Like, yeah, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. They all become just online meetings.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam. So basically what we're looking for here, and anyone that's a coder and wants to start providing this, is some way from an online meeting of capturing a rich picture of that person that will help you to realize what you're going to do next. One of the things I'm interested in is one of our first talks, someone was asked about whether they had had a meaningful connection here at the meeting show. And they gave us an example, not a planned meeting, not someone they'd found in the app, but someone they'd happened to sit next to in the buyer's lounge. Show of hands, has anyone made a connection with someone at the meeting show here over the last 2 days that wasn't planned? It was someone they met where they hadn't gone out of their way to meet them, they just bumped into them, and they think that that might be a meaningful connection that they'll do something with later on. Okay, about half of us. What I think would be interesting would be in the future, I think there's a lot of work goes into things like matchmaking and trying to put people together. People talk about AI and matching you with people ahead of the show. I actually think that's useful, but I think these serendipitous meetings are always really important. And I'm not sure any algorithm is going to manage to match you with the people who might be most meaningful to you. Just to give you an example, at a conference I was at last year, the person who made the biggest impression on me and who I met up with last weekend was a medical student from Sudan. Now, I don't believe that a matchmaking algorithm would have matched her and me, and yet she was a brilliant person. We had wonderful talks around a million different topics. I don't know where that relationship is going. It is now a friendship. She's very bright. It could move into something else. But I think I want us as an industry to do something that will help those kind of serendipitous meetings happen. Has anyone else got a story around someone that they've met? John?
Yeah, yesterday I was sitting at a session. I spoke, and then there was this really interesting process of filtering ideas that I was sharing with you. And the person, I happen to be Venezuelan, right? And we're not many around. And the person that was next to me was not only her husband was Venezuelan, but she was looking for exactly the software that we provide. And then but we had the connection was more on the leadership side. And so I said things that were that resonated to her. And she said, I've seen your brand a lot, and I never understood. I'm so happy that this happened, So, and it was just by coincidence, and they don't sitting next to each other.
Perfect. And I know the actual activity that John was describing there was a really interesting one. So rather than someone standing on a stage and talking to people, it was actually an activity where they asked people to engage in some work together. So they put people together in pairs and they did a little bit of work together. And then they said, okay, now this pair is going to join another pair and we'll do some further work together. And now this 4 is going to join another 4 and we'll do some work together. And actually, the kind of relationship that you build through doing something with someone is definitely going to be deeper and more meaningful. So that's something I would say is that events, please, 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 let's do some more activities in events that put people together to actually do some work on a little problem, because through those problem solving and conversations, they're going to make deeper connections. Has anyone else got some thoughts on what they would look for in 5 years' time when you come to the meeting show 2028? What you would like to be happening that might make your meetings with people more effective? So, Ella, you're new. I'm picking on you. What would help you, do you think? Where do you think either the way the meeting show designs the activities or any technology that could help you?
That's a good question. I guess maybe like clearer signposting of what's actually going on, and like having a better guide for who's who and where to find them, that sort of thing. But I guess it's a bit basic.
Okay, so clearer signposting, perhaps about what's of interest to talk about in this area. Is this a place where people are talking about meeting design? Is this a place where people are talking about technology? So that's somewhere you can go to have those kind of conversations. And a little bit about the matchmaking, it sounded like. So I've got an interest in this area. Can the technology help match me with someone with similar interests? That kind of thing? Perfect. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question for everyone? I just would like to see a show of hands. If I understand it correctly, a lot of what I heard here is about being able to provide an environment where it's more structured, where you as an organizer can help to facilitate those meaningful connections. Who of you do feel like a more managed approach from an organizer perspective, making sure that those meetings happens and being there is the right way to go to create those meaningful connections in the future? All right, that is pretty much 100%. That is definitely something we will have to consider for meaningful connections in the future. Thank you so much for showing your show of hands. I would love to give Tamsin the floor again.
Okay, thank you, Ren. I think it's really interesting to see that there's such a consensus over that as well, because what strikes me is, I don't know about you, but the meetings I go to often have networking events. and there are drinks, and we turn up, and these are supposed to be the places where we're going to make some deeper, meaningful connections. But actually, with no structure, I know what I do. I find someone who I've already spoken to or who I already know, and I go and talk to them. So, Marion, I know you, so I'll talk to you, and then John will come in. Probably not John. We need to pick someone who's probably doesn't think about it. But John, let's say John comes in, and he'll come and talk to us because it's like, oh, right, 2 people I know. And then suddenly we're a triangle. And a fourth person who doesn't know us stands no chance of getting into this conversation now. So I think we need to do events that actually give people a way of interacting with others through those activities, or speed dating. Has anyone been to an event that did speed dating? No? Okay, that's a format that was actually used in online events that I would like to see introduced into face-to-face. I met in online events in 15 minutes. I met 5 different people that I was randomly matched with, and I'm still in contact with 3 of those people. And I think that serendipitous connections can be really good. So I think maybe we're on our time. So thank you very much for your contributions. If anyone has any last comments, I think what I've got from this is there's some interest in the matchmaking. There's definite interest in structuring of meetings to help us. Is there anything else, Merrin, that you saw in the conversations?
Well, in general, I think technology came up quite a few times. Maybe a last question for the audience. Who believes that technology is key in creating meaningful connections in the future? All right. Again, 100%. That is definitely impressive. John, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I was wondering, beyond technology, right? Because it seems like we went in the direction of tools on how do we facilitate, how do we create the conditions for those meaningful connections to happen. But what's going on with us inside? So when you're saying that, I was thinking, what do I wish that I have evolved in 5 years, that I will be able to deal with those, be able to be in a different frame of mind or have a different approach in order to create those connections in a different way. Not only the tools that's going to bring me to the recipient or the connector or the connected, but also what's going on with us as a society. And because I find, like we were talking about before, like making ourselves vulnerable, it's so important in order to connect. Will this in 5 years will be something that we can do more and more? And how does that, what is the repercussion of that?
I think that's really interesting. You're right. We do jump to technology to look to technology to solve problems for us. But what can we do ourselves? I think society as a whole is changing in that there's more awareness of neurodiversity. There's more awareness of other people having different approaches to things, and of mental health issues. So I think that probably will help. I see now the last 2 exhibitions I went to have wellness centres. So you can go and take some time out, do some meditation, use these to get into a quieter zone. So I think that could be the kind of thing that might help with that, by at least calming oneself down so you can then approach those other conversations in another way. Have you got any other ideas, John, yourself, for what might happen that would make this work better?
I'm constantly exploring, if we work on the individual, it's a little bit like Northern societies. If you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, then we will be okay, right? Southern societies are, if we are okay, then you will be okay, you'll be okay, you'll be okay, you'll be okay, you'll be okay. And that's the difference of the approach. So I'm wondering, okay, what can we do to, because the word tolerance came to mind when you were saying that, right? So how do we, so in 5 years, I wish that I and everyone around me was more tolerant on the differences between us, and then we're able to connect better. And the word compassion is the one that comes to me constantly, and kindness. And how can we then come from that place? And instead of closing up, how do we sort of open up a little bit?
And how do we as event professionals facilitate an area where people feel comfortable opening up as well? I think that's where we as event professionals play a very important role, because people won't make their own space where they feel safe. They have to be given a space where they can feel safe and can open up. Tara, would you like to add something to this conversation as well?
I'm grateful to be starting to learn, but I'm really new to the industry. I've just started my new job at Rare Restaurants. So I get the whole networking thing, because I've been to a few now, and this is only my second expedition. And the first one, I had not really any idea where to go, where to be. And same thing kind of for this one. Whereas like if you had a bit more of a structure, I probably would be, if I hadn't bumped into you, I wouldn't be in this conversation kind of thing. So I get where it kind of needs to be a little bit more involved in sort of kind of forced fun in a way. So you can't actually have those meaningful connections with people unless you kind of are pushed into them. Otherwise, yeah, I agree. If I was at a networking event and there was a big group of people that knew each other, I would not go there. And maybe after a few glasses, but not in the beginning. So yeah, but this has been nice. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Adam?
Two microphones. I'm so pleased you're standing there, because you are exactly the person I'm trying to find to make the solutions for. Not just because I got an app and that's what I do, but I always try and we did a talk yesterday, and my session was about understanding somebody else's perspective. And I talked in the session about Shoshin, this reset. Imagine what it's like to be someone at EA that's never been to a trade show before. No matter what it is, what you've done in the past, if you've never been to a trade show, it's quite an exhausting experience over time. There's a lot to think about. And this is before you talk about people that may have neurodiversity in their makeup of some description, without going into sort of niches. So the other thing is, what is it like to be around professionals and thinking, God, I know bloody nothing. I've got a clue what everyone else knows. I'm still trying to find out what everyone else knows. And then their roles, their responsibilities. And sometimes you're thrown into those environments where you're meant to be productive. What the hell does that mean? Like, what do you mean, learn quickly? Do you mean get comfortable? Find out how the tools are working. And quite often these places just find a whole bunch of tools on an app and go, it's all there, off you go. One size fits all. We don't care if you can read, whether you've got hearing problems, whether you struggle with lots of people, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Because if you're an extrovert, the problem is you talk too much, right? So those are still things you have to consider. You don't just consider the introvert. It's how do you get someone who is introverted to feel comfortable in speaking to someone who talks a lot, who's extroverted, who's flagrant, whatever. And we don't progress these shows to help first timers, onboarders, new to, first at event, first at industry, new job, out of college, whatever. And if we really want to prepare the pipeline, you need to walk in and think, this is awesome. This is a place where I feel comfortable as soon as I walk through. Someone's greeted me, not just gone, and off you go. Do you know where you're going next? Is there anything I can help you with? That's lost on us at the door. And that's not all about the app. That's about the human experience and understanding that when you network, it is a human experience. But if you don't facilitate it, that person is wandering around going, oh shit, big place, terrible map, what next? So feel free anytime to reach out for any of the 1,000 tips that I give out, and a little bit of technology that's coming along the way that will probably help some of this. But that's my take on it. I understand your position. I absolutely want to do this for the next 5 years of my life to make sure that every time someone like yourself walks in, it's an easy experience, an enjoyable experience, and not a difficult process. Okay.
So the thing I would like to see in 5 years, and I don't think technology is actually the solution, as John pointed out, it's the evolution of ourselves. But wouldn't it be nice to see the end of the LinkedIn connection request that becomes within a few hours or the next day, a sales pitch. You know that person's not making a meaningful connection. They want to sell you something. I'd love to see the end of that in 5 years. And also the treatment of women on social platforms where men make a supposed meaningful connection. Immediately make comments about their dress, their face, their breast size. Can we get rid of that in 5 years? Yep. That's too much. If you're going to make a true meaningful connection, it's because you want to help, not because you're trying to get anything else. So that's my take.
So I know we're running a little bit late, but would love to hear from you as well, Tony. Oh, you have a session to go to. All right. Well, make sure that either Adam or I scan your badge, because then we can give you actually all the insights that we have gathered during this event in all the 4 different sessions that have been talked about. If we can scan your badge, we will send you a summary of everything we spoke about. And yeah, just to help you realize what we have discussed, because I think it's a very important topic, creating meaningful discussion, meaningful connections. As event professionals, it's pretty much what we are born to do. So yeah, would love to share that with you. Just ask Adam or me to scan your badge, and we will make sure you get all the information. Tamsin, any last word from you?
No, just thank you very much for everyone that had the microphone passed to them without volunteering. It's very good of you to have answered.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the event. Bye, everyone.